Hi, today we are going to see about pulse code modulation topic in digital communications. Communication refers to the transfer of information from one place to another. From dropping a letter to developments like landline phones, mobiles, fax machines, SMS, MMS, email, video calling are all part of communication. When information is transmitted from one place to another, we can expect delays, noise, data loss, and much more. Sometimes, due to noise or disturbance, it is hard to receive the message as it is transmitted. Here comes a concept which is known as modulation, which aids in the proper reception of the transmitted signal. Modulation is the process of alternate one or more properties of a periodic waveform known as carrier signal with respect to the modulation signal, which contains information to be transmitted. Modulation is performed by the device known as modulator, and this technique is mainly used to overcome the interference of the signal. Modulation techniques typically aid in long distance communication. The different types of modulations are analog modulation and digital modulation. In analog modulation, a continuously varying sine wave is considered a carrier wave. This wave modulates the data signal. In amplitude modulation, three parameters can be altered. They are frequency, amplitude, and phase. The types of analog modulations are amplitude modulation, frequency modulation, and phase modulation. In digital modulation, an analog carrier signal is modulated by a discrete signal. In digital modulation, a message or information is converted into the amplitude, phase, or frequency of the transmitted signal. In the encoding process, the signal is converted from analog to digital form, and then the modulated signal is carried by using a carrier wave. Digital modulation is of the following types: pulse amplitude modulation, pulse width modulation, pulse code modulation. In this lecture, let us study in detail about one of the digital modulation techniques, that is pulse code modulation. The pulse code modulation. When a digital signal undergoes pulse code modulation, it converts the analog information into a binary sequence 1 and 0. Through the demodulation process, we can obtain the original analog signal. The figure below represents the output of the PCM signal with respect to the sine wave. Pulse code modulation technique are used to produce a series of numbers or digits in the binary form. Hence, this process is called digital modulation. The amplitude at the particular time of the signal sample is indicated by the binary codes. In the PCM process, a sequence of coded pulses indicates the message signal. This message signal represents amplitude and time. Pulse code modulations are of two types. First one is differential pulse code modulation, and the second one is adaptive differential pulse code modulation. Differential pulse code modulation is a signal encoding process which adds functionalities based on the prediction of the sample of the signal. Adaptive differential pulse code modulation is a technique in which the size of the quantization steps is varied to allow the further reduction of the required data bandwidth to a given signal to noise ratio. This figure shows the pulse code modulation technique. Here, low pass filter, sampler, quantizer, encoder, regenerative repeater, regeneration circuit, decoder, and reconstruction filter is used to convert an analog message signal into a digital signal. In the PCM process, it is possible to digitize all forms of analog data, including music, telemetry, voice, full motion video. To obtain a pulse code modulation waveform from an analog waveform at the transmitter end and to convert the message signal into the binary form, a process known as quantization is used. At the receiver's end, the pulse code circuit demodulation takes place and the signal is converted into pulses with the same quantum levels. Here, a low pass filter helps in removing the high frequency components, including in the input of the analog signal. These frequencies components are higher than the highest frequency of the message signal. Hence, a low pass filter is added in the pulse code modulation technique to avoid aliasing of the message signal. The sampler helps to collect the sample data at any time of the message signal in order to reform the original signal. As with the sampling theorem, the sampling rate is greater than the highest frequency component of the message signal. The quantizer helps to minimize the error through the process known as quantizing. The sampled output, when passed through a quantizer, reduces unnecessary bits and also helps in compressing the obtained value. The encoder is used for digitizing the analog signal. Encoder helps to allot each quantized level through a binary code. The sample and hold process is adopted in this. Low pass filter, sampler and quantizer aids to convert analog to digital forms. Encoding also aids in minimizing the usage of bandwidth. Regenerative repeater is used to compensate for the signal loss and also reform the signal. It also helps to increase signal strength. Hence, the output of the channel is equipped with one regenerative repeater circuit. The decoder helps to form the original signal by decoding the pulse coded waveform. Decoder acts as the demodulator. The reconstruction filter helps to obtain the original signal. In the pulse code modulator circuit, the given analog signal is digitized, coded and sampled. The resultant signal is transmitted in an analog form. In order to obtain the original signal, the whole process is repeated in a reverse pattern. The advantages and disadvantages of pulse code modulation techniques. The advantages of the pulse code modulation technique is used in long distance communication. The efficiency of the transmitter is high. Higher noise immunity is seen, and it is the efficient method to convert analog signal into digital signal. The disadvantages of PCM is bandwidth requirement is high. PCM is a complex process since it involves encoding, decoding and quantization of the circuit. The applications of pulse code modulation is used in telephony and compact discs. Pulse code modulation is used in satellite transmission system and space communications. Here the assessment is given for the topic pulse code modulation. Thank you.